All right, everyone. So good evening. Let's continue. Thank you to Reb Chaim for giving shiur on Thursday night. We are picking up Chafam base 25b at the 2 dots, 2, 4, 6 lines down. So let's remember again, the Mishnah was talking about a situation where a person is in a body of water, and what happens? The Zman for Kriyas Shema comes. So the Mishnah said, if a person can get out of the water and dry themselves off and say Shema in time to meet the Zman, great. But if not, a person should just submerge himself into the water beneath his neck, or I should say, right, just submerge himself until his neck, and then he could go ahead and recite Shema. The Gemara says, Hari liboro ha'erva. We'll say, here's the problem. Remember, we spoke about this many times already before. The concept of liboro ha'erva means your heart cannot see the erva, the nakedness. When is that a problem? When the heart and the erva are in the same quote-unquote like domain, in the same rishos. So the problem is, if a person is under the water, right up to their neck, then that means the heart and the erva is in the same place. How can you say Shema? To which the Gemara says, Amr Rabbi Elazar, Vitim Rabacha Bar Ava, Rabacha Bar Ava Bar Acha, Mishum Rabbeinu, B'mayim Achurim Shanu, T'damu Ka'aras Michta, Shelo Yira Liba Ervaso. What's the case? We're talking about murky water. Murky water. So when it's murky water, because again it's not translucent. So because it's not translucent, therefore we'll say everything is considered to be, Gemara says, considered like aris michta. Aris michta literally means like thick ground. So it's interesting, we view murky water as literally kind of almost like being buried up to your neck in the earth. And everyone would agree that if you're buried up to the earth in your neck, if you're buried up to your neck in the earth, that halacha l'maisa you'd be able to go ahead and recite Shema in that circumstance. Okay? Tan Rabbanon. So what says in Gemara says, Ma'im Tzilulin, Yasha Bahanat Savaro V'Korei. We'll say first wide line, 25b. If a person is sitting in clear water, Ma'im Tzilulin, Yasha Bahanat Savaro, you could go ahead and sit up to that water in your neck. I keep saying that. You could sit up to your neck in that water, V'Korei, and you could say Shema. Fine. And some say, no, what you have to do is if the water is clear, what do? You kind of like move your foot around the, what's the word? The what? The sand, right? The sediment, right? The bottom. Right? The bottom. See, like you kick up the dirt or the mud, whatever is on the bottom, and make the water irky. Sorry, I'm Amish. Okay, it's only Monday. Make the water murky. Okay, good. So according to Tanakama, how can you sit in clear water? After all, again, you have liboro es ha'erva. Do we not have the same problem as we said before? Kasavar, liboro es ha'erva mutter. So interesting, the Tanakama is actually interesting. We saw this a little bit before. Not everyone agrees that liboro es ha'erva is a problem. According to some, liboro es ha'erva is not a problem. Okay, so says, I'm sorry? Because if it's murky, that's what the Gemara said before, it's like aras michta, it's like earth. It's like you're buried in earth. And everyone agrees if you're buried in earth, there's no libara sa'erva. That's the difference. So this is interesting, but what about the fact that your heel sees the erva? In other words, there's another part of your body that sees the erva. So what do you do about that? I will say second wide line 25b. So what do you do about the fact that the heel sees the erva? Then I will say just a word about this for a moment. The ideal over here is as follows. Rashi says over here, V'hari libo. You see Rashi's on the last wide line on top. Really, it changes it to the Hagos Hagra changes it. No, not the Hagos Hagra. Sorry. Who changes this? The Hagos V'tziyunim. V'hari akevo. That should read as your heel sees the erva. Kasaka leitcha kol ever she'in darko liros hasa erva v'ro osa b'shashakar b'torah karina bay v'lo yira b'cha ervas davar. So we'll say the idea over here is like this. That any part of the body that would not normally see the erva, if it does see the erva, that creates an issue for Kriyas Shema. So therefore, normally, again, the ankle, right, the heel doesn't see the erva. Well, if a person is in the water unclothed, then the heel sees the erva. So what do you do about that? So the Gemara says, Kasa, and I will say, okay, as I was going to mention, remember we saw this before, that there is this discussion about how much of the body has to be covered in order to be able to say Shema. And if you remember again, what that was really machlokes is about the pasuk of Kol atzmosai tomarna Hashem michamocha. Is tefillah simply an experience of the heart of Odesh Shebalev? In which case, the most important thing is that the heart doesn't see the erva. That's really the ikar. Or maybe prayer is a full body experience. And if prayer is truly a full body experience, then really no part of the body should be able to quote unquote see the erva. So where's the nafkamina? So a practical difference would be again in the case of the heel, right? If you hold that it's just the din of the heart and the erva, then as long as they're separated, you're good to go, right? However, again, if it's a din of tefillah being a full body experience, then even the heel can't see the erva. So the Gemara says, no, because that's an active covering. That once something is actively covered, then there's no problem. Correct, because it's actively covered. That is correct. So the Gemara says as follows. So kasavra akeva erva mutter. He holds that ultimately, again, there's not a problem with the heel seeing the erva. Again, Tanakama holds that it's only a din of the lave seeing the erva. That's the only problem. So the Gemara says mut itmar, third wide line chafema base itmar akeva asa erva mutter nogea. So let's listen to this. So everyone agrees, according to this approach, everyone agrees that if the heel sees the erva, you can still daven, you can still say shema. What about nogea? We'll say, what happens if the heel is touching the erva? In other words, let's say a person is sitting, and the heel is touching the erva. So what's the halacha there? So Abaye Amar Aser, Rava Amar Mutter. Abaye says that it's Aser, can't daven in that type of situation, and ultimately Rava says that it's Mutter. Rav Zvid masni la hashmai tahachi. So Rav Zvid had an alternate version of this teaching. He said it as follows: Rav Chinina braid Rav Ika. So I'm sorry. So Rav Zvid espoused the teaching as we just said it before. Rav Chinina braid Rav Ika masni la hachi. Rav Chinina had a different version. Here's how he taught it. He taught it as follows. He said, "Nogea divra kol aser." Everyone agrees that if the heel is touching the erva, it is absolutely unequivocally us. You can't dive in like that. Roa, what happens if the heel is not touching the erva, but the heel sees the erva? So Abaye Amar Aser, Rava Amar Mutter. Abaye says that it's Aser, Rava says that it's Mutter. Why? Lo nitna Torah lemalachi asharis. Torah was not given to angels. Torah was not given to angels. Now what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Lo nitna Torah lemalachi asharis. She'in lahem erva. So this is interesting. In other words, Malachim don't have an erva. They don't have erva. Okay, so therefore Malachim could be always have this distinction. So we human beings have an erva. So by definition, again, there's only so exacting we're going to be in order to allow a person to daven. So therefore, again, you don't want the heel touching the erva. But if the heel sees the erva, again, especially going back to Avi's point before, where again, it's legitimate to demand of a person that he be fully clothed. What happens if a person is wearing, let's say, a cloak, but not wearing anything underneath it? So then you have a case of where the heel sees the erva. So again, that must have been a common enough case where if you're going to say that a person can't say Shema under those circumstances, it just really creates an incredible hardship. So Torah wasn't given to Malachi Asharis. The halacha is Nogea Aser, Roa Motar. We'll say that is the halacha l'maisa. The halacha l'maisa is that if the heel touches the erva, is touching the erva, you can't say Shema under those circumstances. So if you can imagine if a person was sitting down, right? Sitting, like what do you call it, cross-legged? Indian style, right? Are you allowed to say that? Yeah, I don't want to. This goes, and this is recorded. This gets posted places, I don't want to. So the Maisa again, say if you're going ahead and you're sitting cross-legged style. So again, and then let's say the heel touches the erva. That is a problem. One can't say Shema under those circumstances. But Roa is mutter. But if the heel sees the erva, then ultimately again that would be mutter.
Is this then only by Kriya Shema? What about can you make brachas?
So B'Pashas, it would apply to any time you're using the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it sounds like. Because this is Kriya Shema. In other words, the sugi over here is the sugi of Kriya Shema. So, I'm sorry? What about the mikvah? Yeah. What are you doing in the mikvah? Besides the backstroke. What are you doing? I'm saying, you're not... A lot of business gets done with it. I'm going to the wrong mikvah, obviously. So again, that's why, by the way, again, what I will point out to Avi's point is, for men, this doesn't really, he's not shocked because we're not making a bracha in the mikvah. For women who do make a bracha in the mikvah, that's why again, the minhag is that a woman usually goes up to her neck in the water and also crosses her arms over her chest. That almost creates like a distinction between the lave and the erva. So that's right. But for men, it's not. For men, again, the whole issue of mikvah is literally just immersion. That's it. So I know some of you were nervous that we were finished with Soa. Right? We're not. Don't worry. There's still plenty to go around. So the Gemara says as follows. So Soa ba'ashashis. Mutter likros kriya shema kinegda. Suppose now watch this. Actually, interesting case. What happens if you have tsoa? If you can imagine, let's say in glass. So imagine for a moment. Say, I'll tell you the way this is phrased, and then I'll tell you just like a simple application of it. So imagine for a moment you have tsoa, and let's say it's enclosed in a glass case. I don't know, whatever you have. You have tsoa. Somebody put a cup over it, right? But it's a clear cup, so you could see the tzoa, but it's enclosed. I will say, or the other application of this could be, there's a window, you're on one side of the window, and the tzoa is on the other side of the window. It's another application of this. So what's halacha? Mutar likros kriya shema kinegda. So I will say, interestingly enough, you're allowed to say shema, even though you could see the tzoa, which is interesting. On the other hand, erva ba'ashashis asur. So we'll say, let's say again, on the other hand, let's say there's an erva in glass. What is it? So again, illustrate it the same way. Let's say there's someone who's unclothed on one side of the window, and you're on the other side of the window. Right? You're on one other side of the window. So then halach l'maisa, the Gemara says, you can't say kriya shema in that case. Now, why the distinction? It's actually very interesting. So if there is tzoa, right, in the window, right, or in a glass case, you're allowed to say shema. Why? The tzoa b'kisui talya milsa v'ha michsei. So this is interesting. If you can imagine the case of having the tzoa, and then imagine for a moment you put a glass on top of it, the din of tzoa is it has to be covered. And once it's covered, you are allowed to say shema. Nowhere does it say by tzoa that it can't be seen. It just has to be covered. So once it's covered, even if technically speaking you could see it, you're still allowed to say shema. Very interesting. On the other hand, erva ba'ashash is also likros kriya shema kinegda. But say if there's erva and the erva is only covered by glass, right? Halacha ma'isi, you can't say shema in that case. Why? V'lo yira'eh b'cha ervas davar. Amrach mona v'akam eschazia. So here was interesting. By erva, right? By erva, it's a din in not seeing the erva. So here the distinction by tzoa, it's a din that you can't say shema opposite uncovered tzoa. So if it's covered, even if it's visible, you're good to go. Erva, it's a din in visibility. So even if, so to speak, the erva is quote unquote covered, in other words, let's say there's a mechitza, right? In other words, there's a window, there's a glass, right? It's covered by glass. Lemaisa, as long as you could see it, it prevents you from saying shema.
So this goes with the opacity of the water, right?
Correct.
Right? But it also goes back to the comment that I made earlier about sheets covering. So your sheets are clear, they're not covered.
If your sheets are clear, they're not a cover. Correct, for erva purposes. That is correct. That is correct. For erva purposes. Correct. That is correct.
So
correct.
what if you're uncovered in total darkness? Nothing can be seen. There's no light. You're in a dark room.
I feel like I'm back. Like it's like the SATs. And the train is traveling due east at 60 miles an hour. There's a Chaburah headed right in your direction. If you're uncovered at night, you're uncovered. And you're still uncovered. You're still uncovered because again, lemaisa, the chefta of the person is still uncovered. Now again, because vis-a-vis yourself, you are still unclothed, right? Vis-a-vis someone else, if they couldn't see you, then einachinami, you'd be fine. They'd be able to say shema. They could say shema. You could not say shema because you know that you are uncovered. They could say shema because they can't see you.
So you're blind.
I'm sorry? So you're blind. Einachinami. So again, if you're blind, then remember, if you're blind, that only helps you regarding someone else's erva. Right? Remember again, libo roa es ha'erva is not a din in you seeing. Right? Libo roa es ha'erva means your leiv and your erva kind of being together in an unclothed state. But in a blind person, right? A blind person wouldn't have these halachos concerning erva. Correct?
Is there
Correct.
no issue with like an odor with soda?
So remember, it's an excellent point. We are presupposing there's no odor over here. Right? Because remember, if there's odor, then einachinami, odor throws everything off. Right? Or odor, presence of an odor would prevent you from saying Shema. So assuming there's no odor, the only issue is that I see someone in front of me, what does that do? So we'll say, so just a very interesting distinction, right? So in other words, so tsoa in a clear covering, you could say Shema. Erva in a clear covering, you cannot say Shema. Fundamental distinction. Tsoa, all you need it to be is covered. Erva, you need it not to be seen. Very interesting. So Abaye, Tsoa, called Shumavat Labarok. So we'll say, interesting. What happens if you only have a little bit of Tsoa? There's a little bit of Tsoa. So we'll say, if there's only a little bit of Tsoa, what you could do is, you could kind of cover it with saliva. You could spit on it, right? And we just had spitting before. Incredible. A lot of spitting tonight, right? So I'll say, so listen to this. So you could spit on the tsoa and kind of that way negate its identity. I'm sorry, only if it's not windy and on Shabbos. Correct. Right. We need a lot of caveats over here. Right. Or with an aerosol can, it would be fine as well. So the Gemara says, so I call Shumavat Barok. Amar Rava, Uberok Ava. Rava says, by the way, we're talking about not just saliva. The Pashtus will say Rok Ava, thick phlegm. So now it makes a little bit more sense. In other words, if you were to take phlegm and spit it on a little bit of tsoa, so essentially, again, what that does is it kind of envelops the tsoa. So the identity of tsoa is not there. And I will say, all the Gemara is saying over here is it's just giving another example of covering tsoa. That's really all this is. Amar Rava, Tsoa beguma. We'll say here's a very interesting case. What happens if you have tsoa in a guma? So imagine for a moment, we'll say there's a hole in the ground and there's tsoa in the hole. So what's the halacha? Manicho sandalo aleh v'kori kriyashma. You could put your foot on top of the hole, thereby what? Covering the tsoa, and you could say shema. Now what's interesting about that, right? Who's the cover, or what's the cover? What's the cover? The cover is me. Even though the cover is me, I'm still allowed to say Shema. At the end of the day, the tsoa is covered. Even though it's actively covered with my foot, I could say Shema. So, Ba Mar Breiz Ravina, Tsoa Devuka B'Sandalo Mai. This is an interesting case. What happens if there's tsoa stuck on your shoe? What is the halacha in that case? And as we'll say, so what's interesting about that case? We'll say is, B'Pashtos, the tsoa is on the bottom of my shoe, which means that what? That it's technically covered, right? Because the bottom of my shoe is against the ground. On the other hand, it's attached to my clothing, attached to my shoe. So does that pose a problem? To which the Gemara says, teku. Interesting, I both say that. Interesting, the Gemara kind of leaves it unanswered. We're not sure. Does that have the status of covered? Or ultimately, again, does that have the status of attached to clothing? So, B'Pashtos, again, what would you do? So, what do you do in a case like this? Teku. So, also, what you would do is, B'Pashtos, the Teku says that before you daven, you should try to scrape it off the shoe. That's really what it would require. All right, let's go a little bit weiter. Amar Rav Yehuda. Akum arum asar likros kriya shema kenegda. Let's say interesting case. You could say you are not allowed to say shema opposite an unclothed Gentile. An akum arum. Simar says, "My area akum afilu Yisrael nami." So we'll say, I don't say. What do you mean akum? You can't say kriya shema opposite an unclothed Jew. So what do you mean akum? To which the Gemara says, Yisrael pshilei da'aser. And we'll say it's obvious that you can't say Kriya Shema opposite an unclothed Jew. So what's the chiddush? Ela akum itzrichalei. So I will say you need, the chiddush is, you can't even say Shema opposite an unclothed akum. Why? So what is interesting? Ma'u detema, holik sibu asher besar chamoram besaram, emar kechamar ba'almahu. I would have thought that maybe an akum is just like a chamor, just like a donkey. Now, what does that mean? So what the Gemara is saying is like this. The concept of an erva is a technical, halachic, categorical definition. Right? Erva is a halachic term. So I might have thought that maybe the din erva only applies to who? To people who are part of the halachic system. But if someone is not part of the halachic system, maybe their nakedness doesn't have the din of erva. Kamash malon de'in hunami ikru erva. To which Gemara says, no. Even an unclothed akum, also his nakedness is called an erva. D'chsiv ve'ervas avihem lo ro. So we'll say. So remember again, this is by Shem and Yafes, by Noach, right? That they purposely did not look at their father's nakedness when they went ahead and they covered him. So you see again that the Torah refers to Noach's nakedness as an erva. So from here you see that the concept of erva, the halachic category of erva, doesn't just apply to Jews, but it applies to non-Jews as well. I was saying, Shloyach, stop over there for tonight. Incredible. What a start.